TV Experience. I'm your host, Ryan Charpentier, joined by the much better looking than I, Ben Goff. I want to put this out in the very beginning. If you lose me, we're having some nasty weather here in Kansas City. We've had it pretty bad in the past couple days. A few tornado warnings, but nobody's died. But if I disconnect, that's why I'll be back as soon as I can. Ben, good to see you. We've
And
got
you?
a little bit of a, as you mentioned earlier, a clickbaity topic, or at least a clickbait title. I had a
Yeah, a
less
bit
clickbait
clickbaity.
title, but you went all in. We're like, hey, how can we grab attention? I
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
really
you
like
you
that
put it
approach.
up as a strong title. I think your title was like, stop wasting your money, and I'm like, let's do shit for free. Like,
Yeah,
so
free's
yeah,
good,
hey,
and
it's
people overlook it a lot.
but yeah, right. I mean, right. So the first most important thing, your room is designed to withstand really big subwoofers. So you're tornado proof in that basement, right?
Uh,
Give or
Depends on how
take.
you look at it. I mean, a tornado, I don't think would be good for the plywood that is sitting around it on the risset clip, so it would probably shove it down and kill me, but it'll be a quick death. I'd get crushed. And that's if that were to happen, like if I were to go out, I don't want to linger. I just want to go. So the theater's got me. It's my bro. He's got me. He's going to take me out. It's going to happen quickly. Or the 64 is going to fall on me. I mean, one of those two. Let's face it, if the tornado picks up a 64, I got bigger problems.
So that's not the answer I was expecting. And I've made a realization because I was taught this at a very young age. Never ask a question in public that you don't already know the answer to.
Yeah, tornadoes are a little bit stronger than that, at least the bigger ones. So if I got hit by like an F1 or an F2, we'd be fine. But if like an F5 came through, I'd be dead.
Right.
There's no stopping it. It'd be like God taking a finger, putting it on a piece of paper, and just smearing everything as it came down. So, it is what it is. But my room's got my back. I'll go out quick.
See, the real weather risk when you're just outside London is a bit of drizzle.
We've got some higher weather risk than that. We got 3 inches of rain in the last half day.
Yeah. We don't have extremes. It's it's never great, but it's also never extreme.
Never terrible. But I get what you mean. I mean, you want your room to be able to withstand what you're doing in it. And not only withstand it, but do it well, because rattles, I mean, this is a free fix. Rattles break immersion. And I see all
Yeah.
too often a lot of people will just be like, "Oh yeah, that wall rattles." Like, fix it, man. You doing
So
those little things and driving a bunch of screws into the wall if you can find the joist, it may not seem like a big deal, but if you can get rid of that rattle, it's a lot bigger improvement on
I have
immersion
a
than you wanna be.
when we talk of things like rattles, I have a confession and I guess something of an apology to make from
Uh-oh.
so I was doing a demo Tuesday last week.
Mhm.
And as Peter Aylett says to me, I talk all the time in public. I always blame him for listening too loud. I always say, "Oh, we'll turn it up to Peter levels." And I've made those points a few times of how loud Peter listens.
Mhm.
So I'm doing a demo. Just Christy and I are in the building doing a demo last week. We've got some consultants in. We're watching the Blade Runner 2049 intro, and I said, Christian will probably come in a minute and tell me to turn it the hell down because the building's going to collapse. But you've asked, what will it do? How far can it go? So we just cruised on up past theatrical reference level. Like we cruised up from there. And I set Christian's car alarm off. It was about 40 feet away.
You probably have a little bit more sound bleed than I do because you're not in a basement.
Yeah, right. We're on a concrete floor. So
Yeah.
if this was a building we owned, we would have fully isolated it off the floor. But it's on a solid, thick,
You're on a
2 feet
slab.
thick slab. Christian's car obviously outside the building.
Mhm.
I set his car alarm off.
Yeah,
So
I wonder what
I'm
it would be if
quite
I
proud
was
of
in the
that.
basement, if I was on the main floor. Probably significant. You can't really hear it outside my house, but the subs are 10 feet underground, 5 sides of concrete,
Right.
so that makes sense. But your
I don't
room
think you would
withstood
have
it.
heard this. I don't think you would have heard it out there. It's there is a lot of isolation. So I reckon that car alarm went off from purely physically moving the ground enough to
Mm,
set off its.
it was upset.
Yeah, I'm quite proud.
Well, that's good. That's a
Um,
good badge of honor. Yeah, my theater can set off car alarms outside.
yeah. So yeah, that's my admission for the day, and my apology that obviously it isn't just Peter that runs the system too loud, because that is the first time we've set car alarms
Don't
off. So
apologize to
yeah,
Christian.
it was really quite loud. Actually, I'll be honest, it was quite loud.
Do you have a SPL meter in there?
Um, Not during that clip. I'd made a point. I was just using from my phone the Audio Tools SPL meter or the RTA,
Mhm.
because we were talking about volume. So like it's funny, those guests, I kind of said like, we were talking about reference level, a little bit about the white paper and stuff, and they sort of said, don't think I've ever actually experienced a private cinema running properly at reference level. Like I'm not sure, like, because a lot of people think they're hitting it and they're not really, especially the bottom end.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, we're already above that. Like, don't be ridiculous. I'm like, no, we're 1 dB above the actual
Yeah,
reference. It's so clean, you just can't tell.
I had a rep in on Tuesday last week, and what I call reference in my room is technically it's above because of my house curve. My base is
Right.
hotter. So I was encroaching on when we had Imagine Dragons on 130. So and you're cruising.
Yeah.
And I told him, he's like, that was reference, right? I'm like, man, we're way above reference.
Way above that.
Way. We passed that a long time ago. I don't
Yeah.
know what you're talking
Oh yeah,
about.
we just cruised on up past reference, and it was kind of like, as much as I will say that you do not need to listen that loud in most rooms, when the system is in a big room and fully capable of it without distortion, you
Mhm.
cruise on past without a thought in the world, and it doesn't sound uncomfortable, doesn't sound unpleasant. They had been in a room the day before, the two guys who were here, and I'd guess we were running, because he took a measurement that day. We're running probably 10 to 20 dB louder than the demo he'd had the day before. And I was like, did it not just feel really underwhelming? He was like, oh God, no, that was plenty loud enough. I wouldn't want that room any louder. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's why that room had no slam, is because you couldn't crank it any
And
louder.
I
Because
think that's a good point, that talking about the free stuff, that the topic of actually today's video
we'll
topic is.
get to that.
Well, no, I think that's a good segue, because talking about reference and talking about slam specifically, that's all timing.
Yeah,
And if your timing's whack, right? If it's not set correctly, Jesus, I use the word whack. How old am I? If it's not great and if it's set incorrectly, you're going to be chasing that tactile feel with more output, and you're just dumping distortion into your room. So, one of the easiest things to fix, not just with subs, but with your speakers, timing. Guys, get your delay, get the phase dialed in. You don't need to change anything. Well, you could change position to help potentially, but free fix. There was a AVS post, or maybe I think it was Reddit, and somebody was asking, I've got an SB2000 and it's not doing what I want. Should I go to an RSL 10 or 12 to get a better feeling? People tell me that the SB2000 is only geared towards low output, not high. And people were telling me, yeah, do that. Like, man, your issue is not the sub. Your issue is your
yeah,
room, or you need to add another SB2000. You're not going to fix it just by changing the sub.
right.
Do not. And this is why I came up with this video idea. Ben and I decided to do this, is because instead of fixing things, right? People have a tendency to just say, my equipment's not working. It's not my fault. I just want to go buy new equipment and problem solved. It's going to be fixed.
I just need a different target curve.
Yeah.
That's like that. The bit that actually bugs me is the thought that the fix is always a target curve, and it probably isn't. It's probably a time thing. So we've jumped around a little bit now. We kind of have put together, I guess, some tips, because I called this 5 ways to improve it for free.
That was just a
meant
clickbaity title. We're not going to.
Yeah, that meant we kind of needed a list. So I didn't really prep, but I have made a list. And time alignment actually wasn't my first thing.
No, but the list, does the order matter?
No, but I'm just saying I think there is I almost would say the first one to me is the biggest,
Okay, alright, so and it's the easiest,
right?
honestly.
I
It
mean,
is the
well,
easiest.
whether it's the easiest depends. So if your main listening room is the family room of your home, if it's
Mhm.
shared with the family and it needs to cater to all the things that you and your family do in that room that aren't just watching TV and movies, maybe it's not the easiest.
Mm,
But I would say optimizing the seating position in that room is the biggest thing you can do for free.
I don't know
Now,
if it's necessarily I mean, I think it's the easiest because sometimes it only takes a few inches, right? You gotta use what you got,
right. The
but
the the problem is gonna be, in most homes, if you took a regular interior concept, what everyone's used to,
Mhm.
you probably have your sofas pushed up kind of near walls because
Mm,
nobody wants to waste a load of space. Like in a UK home, we have smaller homes than you guys.
yeah, I
Like
guess
our
it would
land
depend
costs
on
like money.
no,
We have to
it
pay
would
for
depend
land.
on where you are in the States. If you're pushed
Right.
up against a wall, right? Yeah.
So your room's a bit small. You push your furniture up quite, you don't leave loads of room and put the sofa bang in the middle of the room if it's a fairly small room. So I get that that's a challenge. And I get that naturally in a typically furnished living room, people probably lay their furniture out, not bang in the middle. Um, it's going to make a difference. I would say to people, start thinking around 60% of the length. So you've got 40% of the room behind you.
Mhm.
The midline is challenging for, it's going to be a point where you've got room modes.
Mhm.
I generally would stay off the very middle. Um,
Mm.
I don't want to go too far back because then you end up in a position where you're going to need a much bigger screen. The further you go back, the bigger that screen needs to be for the same viewing angle. So I like to start iterating around 60% back.
Yeah.
And if you've got a dedicated room, damn well get your best row around 60% back. And then you've got room left ahead of it, behind it, see what else fits.
Not
The
even
problem
going to
comes when
those
you
extremes,
squeeze
though.
loads in.
Yeah, but not there's other problems that come in with that too. But even not taking things to that extreme, sometimes all it takes and you can check this by just moving your head around in your main seating position and seeing how things change. Sometimes it does not take much in order to get from a knoll that you're sitting in to something that's decent. So, key and one of the easiest things to do to start is just kind of move around, see how things sound. You can do a
Yeah,
sine wave to see how that particular level, so it's consistent, feels. And then the other thing you can do is turn on REW or Smart or any of the other applications and just hold the microphone and move it around and see what's going on in the room and
right.
see what the response looks like. See what the modes look like in your space. And you may very well be surprised how easy that is to fix just by either really drastically moving your furniture if you have the space or even just moving a few inches. And if you can't move the couch or the seating, maybe all it is putting a cushion that you can sit on to scoot you forward a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be something that's egregious or an extreme, but that takes me to the next thing, and that's not moving you or the seating, it's moving subs and speakers.
Yeah, I guess there's. I'm not a huge fan of the subwoofer crawl because I think rather than crawling around and listening, doing this with a bit of a plan and the microphone's a better idea. But these things go hand in hand. Like the way everyone talks of subwoofer crawl is put your subwoofer where your seat is, then go and find the loudest. However you do the crawl, these two things work hand in hand. So I would say before you right, I'm going to put my sub where my seat is. Optimize that bit to get the seat where it's likely to be best.
Mhm.
Then start working out the best place for subs to go with it. But
Mhm.
you can't assume that only one of those needs to move.
No.
They are
Yeah.
a team, right? That is a system. The seat position and the subs come as a pair, and you move those together to get the best response.
Luckily, with a bit of math, and there's some websites and tools that you can utilize to figure this out because we know how sound propagates at certain frequencies. It's pretty easy to figure out, given a distance from your sub or your speakers, a general area for where your seating is going to be best, right? Given the
Yeah.
dimensions of your room. So you can figure that out. And it's not always spot on because there are things like cavities in walls and other things that play into this that can change some things, building materials, different things like that. But it's going to get you in the ballpark and then you fine tune from there. So once you figure out, and I would agree with you, Ben, once you figure out the seating position or where it's theoretically going to work best, I do like the subwoofer crawl, but I do it with a microphone.
Right.
So I walk around with a microphone and I look at what's going on because sometimes what's giving me the most output, I'll actually find one that looks a bit better linearly. And it depends on what I'm after.
Right.
Depends on how many subs I got, what I'm trying to deliver for the client, where those boosts and stuff are, because that's the other part is, you may have one that's got a mode that pushes things up at X frequency, and you may get another one in a different area that has a little bit of a null there, but it's got like your kick drum. So maybe that null's way further down
Right. Absolutely.
on the second one, but it fixes your kick drum area. And it's a big part of this, guys, is there could be a perfect position, but it's always picking, in my opinion, the lesser of two evils, right? Which one gets me the closest to what I'm after? Unless you're designing the room from the ground up, and even then, it's trying to find the lesser of two evils because I don't know of anything that's going to be perfect until you start bringing in things like arrays and different things. But find what takes out as much of the need as possible for software correction
Right.
and fix as much of that in the room through placement. So, you'd place
So
one just to make sure. You would place one, and then you would let that one run and then find the other location, or would you do it by itself too? How would you go about that?
we've generally had to lock those positions in before you get to calibration. So we'll be testing the room, almost doing the subwoofer crawl, but in a completely different way. But
Mhm.
we'll verify the behavior of the room quite early. So like we'll build the frame of the room, we'll
Sure.
put the riser in, then we go in and take measurements and we verify that the room is behaving modally how we expect. Then we lock those positions down. Now, if I'm verifying that, there's a few different points I go through, but
Mhm.
they don't exist independently. So
Right.
each subwoofer needs to behave correctly, but the real magic is what they're doing as a sum. So I'm not a fan of EQing each subwoofer independently and expecting them to sum together and sound great.
No.
Um,
The funny thing about doing that a lot of times is the EQ that you add ends up doing nothing when they sum together, and you've just wasted your time. And a lot of times it does something negative. So,
right.
but what I meant about the EQ part before we even get there is how would you go about in an existing room that you're not building from the ground up? Would you one sub in, do a crawl with a microphone to find its best location? Would you play it and then do the next crawl while that sub is playing to find the best summation point for the second subwoofer, or would you do it on its own?
It depends how many we've got to play with in total.
Say you got two.
So if I've got two, my very first starting point would to work like the geometry of the room. So I'd
Mhm.
probably come into the quarter points of the room, and then I actually want to see if the summation of those does mitigate the modes I'm expecting, and I'll start adjusting from there.
Yeah.
So using one or another, just measuring one won't have the effect of mitigating modes that they do as a pair.
Yep.
So I would have both of them. If I'm going to be adjusting both positions, I'm going to get them time aligned, and I'm going to then have both of them playing and check whether they've done the mitigation I expect. If they've not, I'll move them both and take a measurement again. So I'm really predicting what I expect to happen, and I'm moving them till it does that. I'm not moving them freely and taking measurements and like which of all these positions I could have is the best. I know what I'm expecting to happen,
Yeah.
and I'll fine tune the position as a pair until it does what I predicted was going to happen.
Okay.
So it's not going to be the same as everyone else would do it because they probably haven't made the prediction up front of I'm expecting to put these in these locations and that will be the outcome.
So
I'm really verifying that what I predicted would happen does happen.
MKH Audio says, is opposite corner usually the best for 2 subs or front?
Realistically, go back and watch the issue we did on where subs should go. So
I agree.
the corners will be loudest.
Yes.
And
you're corner loading them.
Right.
Because remember, sound propagates out 360 degrees. It's omnidirectional. So it's going behind the sub, hitting that wall, that boundary, and coming back. So you are corner loading by sending the back wave back towards you.
So you're definitely going to get boundary gain.
Yep.
And that will make it louder, or it will make it work less hard for the same level. So that is a benefit. But the front corners aren't the best position, or any corners aren't the best position to mitigate the most detrimental room modes.
Yep.
So they will effectively make a phantom summed image. If you do both front corners, they'll make a summed image, which is like one bigger subwoofer in the middle.
Yep.
And that will mitigate the first width mode. But it leaves the second and the third width modes untouched, which are likely to be where seats are, and they're likely to be in a frequency range that you don't treat with bass traps.
Yep.
And it's really irritating if you've got a bad mode there that you have to then deal with by pulling out energy. You're going to cost yourself all that slam and the energy that you want. You're going to lose it because, like in the seats that don't have those room modes. So trying to mitigate the second or third is going to be a better plan. And you can't do that from the corners.
The best
coming
thing to
into quarter points, you're going to mitigate more room modes.
The best thing to do, MKH Audio, is to go back and watch that video where we talk about subwoofer placement, because there's actually some tools that we show that show those modes and what the wavelength is doing in the room that'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. Because it's one thing for us to talk about it. Go back and watch that video and you'll be able to see what we're talking about in the summations and nulls of those waves. So you can put that into a better context for what's actually going on. The trade-off, though, is if you're going to quarter points, and this is why my recommendation to people when they're saying, hey, how big of a sub should I get? My recommendation almost universally is you get the biggest one you can and best one you can possibly get now, and then add another one later, because then you're not dependent on the corner loading. You can put them anywhere in the room, and a lot of times quarter, 3/4, or third, or even 3/4 back. It allows you a lot more flexibility, and you're not reliant on something like corner loading to get more of that output. The sub can do it on its own. So biggest, baddest thing is always my recommendation, and then add another one. The other thing that I always see people run into is they'll get one sub, especially when they're an enthusiast. They'll use it for a while and be like, you know what? I want more. And then they're ending up spending the money anyway. So just suck it up. Do it now.
Worst case,
that money.
Worst case, they get the first one and they're like, oh, it's not got enough slam at 30 hertz. Right. What I'll do is I'll add a big ported one to this lovely sealed one I've got, because then I'll get more at 30. Oh, God. Right. So.
Oh, wow. Why did it all go away?
It can be done. Sure. Right.
It's a pain in the butt.
Is it difficult to optimize? Sure.
Well, and it's not a free lunch either. You're correcting things, but you're creating issues.
Right.
Maybe smaller issues in other places, and you're just kind of going, well, I'm going to live with this. So remember, everything that happens, AV and really, frankly, outside of AV, there's a compromise. So you may be fixing that, but it's always best to not create that potential problem to begin with, which is why we always recommend, as much as possible, to match your subs. This goes further than just saying, oh, I can put another sealed sub in. They are easier to integrate, but my recommendation is actually same subs, because then you're removing as much of those problems as possible with alignment and phase as you possibly can. But great question.
I actually really like the question we just had in from, I'm going to say Backup. I've got no idea if
It's
that's
Brian Cobb. He's one of my customers, actually.
okay. So it's about going without subwoofers in the front, and this is interesting because when you get subs in the front right and you get a wave that comes through and hits you, I really like it.
Yeah.
But there's so many other considerations that I would say, if you're worried about the quality across multiple seats, you can optimize that without needing to have subs in the front. And I've got some great rooms that only have subs in the back because the front just would not work with the way you interacted with modes to where the seats needed to go. So front subs just would not have worked. It was not an option at all. We demoed it to the client. We proved it to the client by essentially putting demo subs in the room and turning him round so he could sit on different positions. But I'm building a room at the moment where all 4 subs are on the ceiling, firing down, because the seating area is kind of unique. It's a huge, great big U-shaped sofa, and there's so many room modes we have to mitigate that placing them on the quarter points and the ceiling gave us loads of control. Will it feel a bit different? Yes. Will you localize it? Not once we've dealt with it, because we'll time align it absolutely perfectly. The crossover will be perfect. You will not get a localization problem in a room we've built. That's a fact. You won't feel a wave coming from the front.
But let's talk about that for a minute, because not every room's going to be perfect. A lot of people are going to be adding subs after a system's been mostly fleshed out. They may have limitations that are brought in due to budget constraints, space constraints that maybe, and this is something that I think is really important for people to consider, because it's not universal, in my opinion, that you should not place or don't have to place subs in the front. If you have speakers that dictate that your crossover must be higher, you are going to create a pretty significant problem if you don't have subs in the front, because it's going to localize certain frequencies, especially lower tones in a male vocal, away from the front soundstage. And that is not a place that you want to be. So I guess Ben is absolutely correct. I just want to throw the caveat in there that, and Ben or Brian, from your room, I don't think you'd have a problem because you have S7Is and they're going to be able to get low enough depending on the output, right? That's the other thing that has to be considered is seating distances and output expectations for SPL at given frequencies, whether or not they're going to be able to do
an S7i. You're gonna push an S7i so hard before you have to raise that crossover point, right?
What's their frequency response? He sits quite a decent amount away from his front sound stage, though. Per listen, S7i.
What you're telling me, Ryan, is maybe he needs some S7i special editions.
They don't have those yet.
No. Yeah. No, not I's. No.
They have T's.
Are they going to exist?
So people, I don't know. I have no idea.
I was just thinking of S7T special editions because they play 3 dB louder.
Yeah. I'm trying to get up the tech specs and looking at the response to see what this thing will actually do. Okay, I'm going to share this because I think this is absolutely something that people need to consider, right? And we want to make sure that people don't get themselves into trouble. And this is why we push for measurements, because if you don't have these measurements and you don't know what the speaker is doing, you cannot make these decisions objectively. It does not happen. So you need the measurements in order to figure out what is actually going on in the room. So I'm going to share this and we can go through this particular example. Okay. So here, I'm going to get rid of our faces. Here's this. Let me make this bigger. Okay. So here's the response. And it looks, that's 90. 3 dB down is 80, roughly, right in there. So then what's the The problem is we don't have compression data on this. Do you have any?
If I do, I don't have it publicly.
Okay. So let's say it's 117, right? So 117 way up here, 3 dB down. Uh I guess it would depend on where your crossover point is. What do you think?
Yeah, I let's put it this way. I've never used S7Is and run out of power in the rooms where I've spec them. So it depends. There are rooms certainly that we have determined are too big to run pilot and full stop.
Yeah.
And I would say their specs are conservative. But like we talked before about what does it mean on a spec sheet, and while some manufacturers make claims that are very optimistic, the per listen numbers are very conservative.
They are.
So this is the problem. You know, it's how we make an apples to apples comparison when he is very hopeful it might out, and the other's saying it will definitely go this. I've got your back. It's going to go plenty more than that, and look like they're the same, and one are way more capable than the other. And per listen are definitely conservative. So
they are way more capable.
But it's a valid
I
point.
would, Brian, if I were in your position, I would throw this into REW and I would look at what is actually going to happen. Not actually, but what it tells you to get a baseline for how much am I going to lose by not putting subs in the front? What is going to happen modally in my room? How much better, if at all, is it going to be putting the subs at the positions that you're wanting? So without doing that, and I can help you with that, without doing that, you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants. And I know you have a unique room. We need to model it and look at what's actually going to happen. I'm of the opinion that as much as possible, you want to have subs in the front, if possible, because I think it just does. It's better for the overall soundstage. It's better for anchoring with the LCRs. It's better. Right. It's just better in.
It's definitely the preference.
Yes,
but when
necessity
you get
calls,
other things correct, I would say it's not the only route that works.
No, if
you can
take
get a great result, and this is where we start to trade off consistency for outright perfection. You know, sometimes we'll make a job where there is no seat that is extraordinarily better, like one absolute perfect seat. But what there is 4, 5, 6 that are all 95%. And that's for client choice. But do you know what? Actually, it's more important to me that this whole row is optimized than just that one seat. And that can be where you might choose to offset some of the gains from being at the front to get more consistency across a bigger range.
Sure.
It's a trade-off, but it's not the only way, right?
No. It's a great question, Brian. We need to throw that into REW and take a look at what's actually going on. MKH Audio says, what's the benefit of extra subs? I have dual, this is going to be a conversation on subs today. I have dual PB 3000s. So the benefit of extra subs is actually, instead of answering this, you need to go back and watch our video about sub placement, because that's going to enlighten you far further than what we're going to give you the synopsis on here. So go back in the playlist and take a look at how to place subs in your room.
The simple answer is more subs is more better, but
more subs is more better as you approach.
Video will explain why.
Yes. Can't have too many as long as you have the space that's adequate for them. Okay. So
now,
I've got stuff starred.
I was going to say, before we carry on and talk about our next of 3 points, let's take one more question here that I kind of have read, and I need to read it properly because I'm interested in the question. Hi, Ryan and Ben, have you experienced a subwoofer placement that's perfect for rooms acoustics, controlled decay and modes, but a mediocre chest slam? Yes, and I'll explain why, and we kind of covered this before, but this is absolutely totally possible. So you can position those subs for a really amazing modal response and then not calibrate them in a way that delivers what you want. So there is a split between the design, the engineering, the calibration. I've kind of, I would say I am a designer. You know, if we take Formula One, I will design a car. I'm not the guy that drives it. Other people do our calibrations generally, but I have enough R&D time doing calibrations to know what each thing does and doesn't do. And chest slam is, to me, the airborne slam comes from time alignment. It comes from, it's so important in a group delay and a time alignment thing, which is a bit different from the tactile, visceral rumble. But the airborne slam, it needs level. You can't do it quiet. It just doesn't really work quiet.
You can tell it's there, but it
Sure.
becomes more realistic the more level you add.
Right.
So it not having the level doesn't mean it's not there. You can
Sure.
definitely tell that it's there.
Yep.
But the more level you add, and you can add too much, the more level you add, the more visceral and like a shotgun blast, the more realistic that's going
Right.
to feel.
And when I say level here, I would be bringing up, if it's comfortable and it suits the room and it suits the system, bringing up the entire level. What I am against is EQing specific bands. You know, we've all seen people who go and analyze some footage and go, oh, shotguns are at this frequency and
Let me boost that.
punches are at that frequency, and they boost those frequencies. I could not be more against that if I tried.
You mean to say that there are other things that happen at those frequencies that are not necessarily a shotgun going off? Oh, man.
And we do this dem, and I did it the same day. I had the guys here where I set the car alarm off. So we played, what did we play that was nuts? Well, I played something that was nuts and aggressive. You know, we'll do some through the wormhole. There'll be some guns, right? There was some action happened. And then I dropped back to A Star Is Born. And funny enough, the kick drum still sounds the right size and level in the mix of that audio.
Yep.
Because we haven't EQ'd this massive kick in for gunshots that completely ruins music.
You know, the interesting one that you said there was Interstellar. If you watch Through the Wormhole, there is energy coming at virtually every frequency from the subs, but you're not getting hammered by that tactile, not tactile, but the punch, the slam in your chest. It's a different feeling because the sound is different. But if you go to something like John Wick, or you go to something like A Star Is Born, which is not as aggressive, you then get that slam. So they both sound appropriate, right? That's the key. As long as the sub stays in control and doesn't get to a point where it's out of control and distorting and pushing to its limits on X max or going past them, that's the important factor, is everything within the bounds of being in control. And levels, in my opinion, how they are in my theaters, they actually tilt a little bit because I want a little bit more output on the low frequencies to have them conceptually be the same. If you try and put them this way or this way, you're going to notice as frequencies move down, it's going to be a lower. You're going to perceive them as lower, even though the energy is the same. It's just how the perception works at different frequencies with our ears. So a lot of people's house curves, and Ben, yours are probably this way. I know Adam does this, Matt does this. They're this, right? As they move down towards the lower, they're coming up and up and up and up gradually. It's not aggressive. You can look at the whose graph is that?
So we would actually go more aggressive with that curve, the lower in level the client's intending to listen to.
That is, yes. And
the louder it gets, because of the way equal loudness curves work, so much, and the perception of low frequencies. The louder that room is going to be run, the shallower that target curve gets.
And there's some dynamic processes that AVRs, Trinov has them, Storm has them, Denon, Marantz, a lot of them have them that try and fix that situation, because as you go lower and lower and lower and lower in volume, you do have to boost up those lower frequencies perceptually so that they're even. There are dynamic processes. I can't promise that they're perfect, but they do help. They do absolutely help because it can be difficult unless you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time with different calibrations and have an automation system that says, "Oh, he's playing at this SPL. I'm going to have this calibration going."
Yeah.
It can be problematic in order to have those all set for different SPL levels. Some people
Yeah.
do, some people don't.
But then
Dynamic processes help.
the next part of this is so there's no big boost. We're not going right. Oh, 70 hertz mid bass. That's where all the chest slam is. Stick 6 dB on it. That's you will never catch me doing it. I am not a fan of that.
No.
I do not like the idea of having to change my EQ on a per movie basis. I'm not gonna watch a film once to find out, oh, this one's got some mortars in it. Right. Let's EQ those in ready for when I watch. Not gonna happen, right? The system should play whatever I throw on today well. So I'm not gonna EQ in specific things because I want the John Wick slam on this film. Not gonna happen.
All right. We got to get back. I've starred questions. We will come back to them, but we got to get back to the topic.
But getting the timing right is key.
Yes. All right. So next one on this is brightness and contrast. We're jumping to video here for a moment. This is so easy, but it seems intimidating, but it's so easy. And the key with doing this, ladies and gentlemen, is not the key to doing it, but the reason you do want to do it is because if you don't, you may be missing things. You're going to run into crush, you're going to run into blowout, and potentially your colors, your blacks and your whites, as you move through the range, and all of your colors, they're just not going to look as good as they could. Perceptually, you may not notice until you change it, but definitely something you want to do.
And the easy part of this is you might want to have a setting with the lights on and lights off. Like if your display has got a day mode and a night mode, set up a brightness and contrast with lights on or day mode and lights off. They are not the same.
No, especially for projectors.
If you're trying to make the room most optimal for movies, get it dark, right? Close curtains if you've got them, turn lights off, bring the overall light level in that room down, and have a setting on your display optimized for that lower light level.
Yep.
And it's easy. Like we own multiple test discs and all kinds of test patterns and generators. We've got, the Meridio generators. You can get a perfectly good pluge pattern from YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. If you just Google brightness, contrast, or pluge, which is PLUGE, which I forget what it stands for. It's picture lineup generator. A pluge pattern, right? Get your brightness and contrast, iterate them. You can't set brightness, move on to contrast and think it's done. You set one, you set the other, you move back to the first one and check it's still right. Adjust that. It's an iteration. Move between them a couple of times. Okay, you have a pattern that does both. That's great. I normally use a brightness one and a contrast one.
Well, really, realistically, you want to use them separately because the bright one is contaminating the dark one.
Sure.
But this is what they look like. And this one actually isn't ideal because you don't have all of your steps. Your limited range one would go down to 16, and then your top one would go to 234. So, and then your full one would go to 0, and then the top would go to 255. So it depends on your range. Most content is going to be limited range, though, unless
they've done that, I guess, as percent, because absolute white is not 100, right?
Yeah, that is what it looks like.
So don't use that one.
No, but this is what they'll look like. Don't use this.
Absolutely,
this is what they look like. Sorry,
and there are plenty of them on YouTube. Like
there are.
You can find one for free and adjust them. It's not like the good old days. I'm sure. I still remember Terminator 2 DVD had a hidden menu with all the patterns in it. The holy grail.
And it does not need to be a video. It can be a static image. It doesn't. You don't have to do them on YouTube. You can find a image and then put it on using a flash drive or whatever you want to do on your UHD player, however, NVIDIA Shield, however you want to do it. Doesn't have to be a video. It's a static image. So I do like Ben's approach. Don't put them with the bright and the dark on the screen at the same time because you are contaminating your darks, especially on a projector. Any type of light reflection is going to lower your contrast measurement. So definitely do one with just darks and then do one with just brights. You could do brights with the dark one on because it's not going to care. Uh, Definitely fix that though, because it'll
Right.
make a difference.
And that's, this is the spirit of not, where this discussion originally started from was buying more kit. What do I buy to fix this problem? Well, if you've got washed out or crushed colors, like, do not try and fix your colors by eye. That's a hiding to nothing. I am pretty convinced that most people trying to adjust gain and color balance will not improve it. Do not do color balance by eye. Absolutely do brightness and contrast by eye.
The funny thing that happens with that a lot of time when people try and calibrate color by eye is they'll calibrate it and then go back to how it originally was and go, "Oh,
Right.
it looks better how it was than what I
Yeah.
changed it to." Some people can, especially if you're using like color swatches and stuff, but
Sure.
it can be done. It's not impossible, but it's
I'm sure
not ideal.
the visual equivalent of perfect tone exists, that somebody can see colors and, oh, I know exactly how to fix
Mhm.
this. I've never met anybody that has that
Mm-mm.
ability. I would say most displays come pretty good from a
They
factory
come
now,
pretty
but like,
close.
they're not terrible.
Unless you're in a dynamic mode, then it can get pretty
Right.
egregious.
But brightness and contrast will almost certainly not be optimal for your room.
Sometimes they're pretty JVC is usually pretty close.
Okay. Yeah, but they're not likely to be perfect.
No.
And you can get improvements by fixing
Yes.
brightness and contrast. Stay away from the color dials.
Yeah.
It's like, there's things you can move. Saturation, sure. You can adjust that to your taste a little bit without killing things. But if you're going into adjust individual color balance, like if you're in the CMS by eye, it's not going to go well.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
So
There are
next
measurement meters and there are processors and there are ways of doing this. Don't do it by eye.
So real quick, you brought up measurement meters, so I want to talk about this. Measurement meters are not all equal. And you can actually have incorrect measurements if you're using a lower quality meter, especially on really high quality projectors that have really narrow wavelengths. They can misread things and you may get some really wacky responses from them. So it's really important to check and verify,
Yeah.
right? If you get something and you calibrate and you look at it and go, that does not look right, odds are that it's not right? Trust your gut on that. And even if it is right, but you think it doesn't look right, there is nothing wrong with deviating to your selective taste. That is perfectly fine. Now, you may find after living with it for a while that you go back, what have you. It doesn't matter. But the importance that I'm bringing up here is check and verify. Even if it's just pulling up a color swatch on your phone, because these things are usually pretty accurate. iPads, Apple does a really good job of getting things pretty accurate. Of course, they're not perfect. Some photographer in there is probably going, you actually need to, I understand that, but it gets you pretty close if you hold up a color swatch of like what red is and you're pretty close to it using a cheaper meter, you're probably okay. But if you're really off, things can go poorly. So just
Yeah.
throwing that out there that you can get yourself into some trouble if you've got a really narrow wavelength projector with its lasers and a meter that can't read wavelengths of that narrowness.
I've even just seen them set up poorly. When we're doing a bit of calibration, we have 2 meters. We have one that's very accurate and one that's very fast.
Yeah,
And
spectro versus colorimeter.
right, I'm not the video calibrator in this business, let's be fair. So the exact technicalities
But
I need,
frankly, all you're doing is
right,
you're taking the spectro, which is really, really accurate, and then
exactly.
you're calibrating the
Off
colorimeter
the
off
current,
the
yeah,
spectro.
yeah,
You're giving it parameters and saying, "Hey, this is what you need to use for
right.
baseline." And then it says, "Okay, I'm gonna do that," and then it gets everything else accurate.
Yep.
So the The
But
reason
without that step, you're calibrating it quickly to be wrong.
Right, and the reason a lot of them get more and more expensive is because their ability to read narrower and narrower wavelengths increases. Like, if you look at Jetty, you look at, um, Color Research or any of these, the as they go up, there's some other functions that go with them. They usually get more narrow and more narrow and more narrow and more narrow, and I think the Jetty right now is at 2 nanometers, which is insane in comparison to where we were in the past. But if you tried to do a full color calibration with a Jetty 1511, you'd be there for days because especially as the dark colors come in, it takes 20 to 30 seconds on
Yeah.
the full dark stuff. And you don't have time for that. And even on the bright stuff, it takes 5 seconds to get a
A 1D
estimate.
LUT, sure. Right?
Yeah,
If you're doing a 10 or an 18 point grayscale,
sure.
sure.
But
But if
if you're
you're doing
doing
I don't even know what a big LUT is these days, a 20 something, or 19 by 19 cubed, I
that's
guess is
pretty
there,
big. Yeah.
right? It's going to take forever.
And Klein or a Color Research or something, you're reading multiple patterns a second as it's
Yeah.
going through there, and that's why you do them. It's time.
Yeah.
But they're not as accurate as the Jetty is.
But I'm going to
Okay.
stand by
So
without one, stay out of the CMS.
I would agree. I would agree. So next one is speaker to speaker time alignment. And I think this is also bass, getting that dialed in, but speaker to speaker.
Yeah. We talked so much about bass. I wanted to talk about this one independently. I don't know how many people go back and verify the results after running auto EQ. I don't know. Obviously, I know what we do, but I don't know if you're an average industry professional or if you're a hobbyist, you run Dirac or you run Optimizer, or, whatever you run, and it says on screen in your report that it's perfect. How many people check that? And I
Probably
would
not a lot.
say that there are absolutely differences between those systems, how accurate they are. But there's some things that you've got to consider when you even take those measurements. In almost all of them, the first microphone position will set a reference position that the time alignment's done to. If you've not put that first one really accurately to where you're going to sit, those speakers are going to get time aligned to a different location.
Mm-hmm.
And, we get hung up on very small differences in time alignment. I was looking the other day at a set with, I don't know how many speakers are in there, 29 main speakers, I think. And actually, when I looked at it, it probably wasn't as close as it maybe could be. But if we converted those into distance, we're within plus minus 10 millimeters as a distance equivalent. Every AVR is going to have a difference in what its finest tuning is. Like if your fine tuning is, I forget what they are on some of the Japanese processors, it will be, is it an inch?
I think it's feet.
Yes, it's point
Point
something of a
something
feet, right? Is
Yeah.
it 0.1 of a foot?
Or it's point X of a meter. It's one of those two. I don't remember,
Right.
but I think it's point X of a foot.
If it's 0.1 of a foot, so we're talking about 1.2 inches, you can move that in time. Now, I would say after you've run auto EQ, and this will also change depending on your AVR or your processor, there are some processors that once you've run an auto EQ, there is zero you can do to adjust it.
Yeah.
You cannot then manually tweak a few different things. On the process that we use, you could run their EQ and then you can still manually move delays. So if a processor is one you can't make any changes and you run it, it tells you everything's perfect. You put your UMIC 1 or whatever your standard independent measuring microphone is, not the one that came in the box with the AVR. If it's a low cost $1 button mic, put a microphone bang in the seat position and take an impulse response. It's easy to do in REW or, it's free software. check what those alignments really are. If they are more than an inch out and you can't move it in that process after the auto EQ, run it again. Like, we're looking to get things that close. Cool. Christian just turned the lights out in the office.
And I'm going to use an example for this. So Storm, I don't know how accurate Chernov allows you to get. Storm allows you to change things down to the 100th of a second. And I can tell you from experience, when changing the LCRs in any speaker in the theater, changing by a few hundredths of a millisecond is enough for you to perceivably tell. You can hear images shift left and right as you're doing this. Our ears are amazingly time sensitive.
Right.
You will be able to tell.
So
but I think it's really important, and I'm going to kind of counter what you said, Ben, a little bit. I think you start at bang on the measurement. This is where it needs to be. Sometimes I have found, though, that I need to deviate from that a little bit perceptually. And I think this can come down to client, how our ears work, what our hearing loss is in certain ears to be able to create different things. But sometimes I have found that I've had to deviate from that perfect line in order to get what I'm subjectively after.
Okay. And if you've done that intentionally for a creative reason,
yes,
I will accept your decision to do that.
But I think you have to start at the objective.
Right.
This is where it needs
what
to
I
be.
would say is if you've relied on an auto EQ system to be right and you've never verified it, then it could be off and you don't know. And you can attribute many other things that the system's doing wrong to that delay. You know, the sounds aren't panning nicely around the room, or you're getting for dialogue, it can be really key, because if your center channel is not time aligned with the left and right, you can easily get like comb filtering and things on the front stage. Like, you take a sweep of each speaker individually and they all look great, but because the time alignment's out, when the same thing plays through the left and the right, if they're not in time, there can be comb filtering, and your frequency response as a pair is not the same as they were individually. So nailing that time alignment down as close as possible, certainly from a screen channel perspective. Like, I totally understand, and I've seen people add some delay to surrounds to try and have spaciousness, especially in very small rooms. There are some creative things you can do by choice, but if you're left and right and not time aligned, don't new speakers are not the fix. Like, that is real straightforward.
No.
Fix that. You don't fix that by spending money.
So you bring up a point that I hear all the time, especially, and this doesn't have anything necessarily to do with time alignment because it's one speaker. People all the time, there are numerous threads on AVS and Reddit about, I can't hear my dialogue, I need a new center. And that, in a lot of cases, is a waste of time. Right. What ends up happening in a lot of those situations is their belief is that I need to push volume, I need to push SPL to fix my problem, instead of fixing the issue that is actually occurring, which is going to be things like the room or like your speaker angle. We talked about this earlier with speaker and subwoofer placement, where they need to be angled appropriately. Speakers, tweeters, especially, you need to look at dispersion if you can, if there's measurements, and figure out, where does this speaker need to be angled so that I'm going to be within the range. You also need to correlate this in with CEA 2034 to look at the frequency response for off angle, slight off angle responses instead of on axis, to figure out, where does this speaker need to be for the most linear response at my position, and then weigh that against how much you're trying to equal that out over multiple seating positions. And I think I see all the time when I've got clients here locally or enthusiasts posting pictures, they'll post a picture of a center channel and it's in a media cabinet firing at their knees. Like, well, no kidding, you can't hear it. And it might be backported and it's just firing into an enclosed box, and it's creating all these issues. You guys need to people need to fix those problems before you chase upgrading your equipment. All you're doing by increasing, and this has become, humans have a propensity to equate increase in SPL as an increase in clarity. All you're doing is increasing SPL. All the distortion's still there. All the
Yeah.
issues are potentially still there. It may be perceived as clearer because you can actually hear what's going on, but it's not nearly as good or balanced as it would be if you fix the underlying problem, which more often than not can be fixed for free.
Right.
And then that
And we've not added on this list because we bounced it around. So we didn't put the, as Floyd called them, I think Floyd Tool calls them a normally furnished living room, or the treatments of life. Like, there are things that we have naturally in a room. If it's, if it's a living room, not a dedicated room, that moving those will change the acoustics of that space. So
yeah.
if you've got that center channel in a cabinet firing at your knees, and then between you and it, you've got a coffee table, you're not helping yourself. So, move the coffee table to get a clearer line from the speaker to your ears. But sometimes a coffee table will be beneficial because actually you've got the center channel a bit higher and you've got a really thick carpet, and the reflection may be beneficial. We've talked before,
It
not all
helps.
reflections are bad, right? It may be that coffee table getting in between the carpet that's sucking all the energy up might help. But things like moving bookcases around, moving coffee tables around, rugs, if you haven't tried adjusting the acoustics with the stuff that you naturally have in your living room, buying a new center channel is not the fix.
Or try simple as putting a piece of foam underneath the center channel to angle it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much to get a better experience if you're running into these issues. And this does not just apply to your center. This applies to everything. Angling any of the speakers, tilting them to get you more of a on or off axis response depending on the speaker and the linear response that you're trying to get after. Angles are really important. And the best way to figure out how much of an angle you need is, one, look at the measurement data, and two, angle them and see how they sound. See what's going on and measure.
Now, my last one, it might be slightly controversial because it's irritating when it's really wrong, but I don't know if people have played with it or experienced enough rooms to experience the difference it makes when it's really right. So lip
And I
sync
don't think
is a
people realize
bugbear.
how subjective this is and how when it's wrong.
Right.
When it's right, most people agree that it's right. Well, not all the time. When it's wrong, it is amazing how different people believe it to
Yep.
be.
And so I would set lip sync with a tool. We set it with an actual tool, right? We use a thing called a
1-2.
Sync 1-2, which has a light sensor and a microphone. We use a specific test pattern which plays a chirp and flashes the screen exactly in time. Now, somebody remind me, we're going to have loads of people watch this. I need to speak to Benoit at Trinov, who's really good at making videos that he gets uploaded onto the Kaleidoscape. I have my test pattern side loaded onto our Kaleidoscape as a demo video.
I
That
do
doesn't
too.
work on all my client ones. As I already know Benoit, and I already know he makes great videos for Trinov, we need to bully him. I haven't even asked him yet, so I'm going to do this now. He needs to commission a lip sync video.
There is one.
Be Trinov branded. I don't care how Benoit does it, but because he already has the right connections to get those demo videos onto the Kaleidoscape, we need a lip sync video.
Oh, on to Kaleidoscape. Yeah, we
on the
absolutely will.
Kaleidoscape. Right?
There
Because
is one that's not. It's on the Spears and Munsell disc, the audio sync pattern.
right?
And it's
It's
great.
fine. You've got it on the Spears and Munsell disc. You've got them on YouTube. Like, Netflix actually has one. It's hidden if you know the specific link for it, and they are different by country. So I can't just share a generic one. But there is a hidden lip sync alignment test inside Netflix if you search the right thing.
But, and this is an important one to talk about. Oh boy, can they change. App to app, device to device.
Which is a great thing for doing it. That's why I want one in the Kscape, because if I just turn up with a Blu-ray player and I put the Spears and Munsell disc in and I set it, I don't know that the signal path is going to be identical when we move to Kscape. So I need one inside Kscape. And in our demo system, we sideloaded it because it's a demo unit. we can upload our own demonstration material onto that. You can't do that with a client
That is
swap.
only
That kind of thing.
available to custom integrators, dealers, and people in the industry.
Yeah, it's a showroom or a exhibition thing, right?
Yeah.
We can use it for a welcome to our cinema. This is what you're listening with a demonstration video. You can upload a very specific thing.
Yeah.
You can't put films on it, right? You can upload a
Consumers are not allowed to do that.
right. So I need somebody to upload one for me, and Benoit will
That's a
be the
good
guy.
idea to get Benoit to do that. I didn't think
Yeah,
about that.
I've been thinking for ages. I need to call Benoit and get him to do it because he'll absolutely nail it within he'll just get it perfect, and he can just add it to their uploads. He's the guy. I
Mhm.
just have to remember to do it. So
Mhm.
everyone remind me, or just ask Benoit directly because he'll love that.
I need to send him a message.
Right, and here's why I set it with a tool or a specific test pattern and not by watching vocals. So we have developed through evolution this ability that when someone's mouth moves and we hear their words, we put them together. It is a ventriloquist effect that if that time alignment is a little bit out, like we're talking tiny amounts out, when it's a dialogue, your brain will put them together. Now, it can cause a little bit of weird subconscious discomfort having to align them, but your brain pretty much will deal with it if they're close. What won't happen is your brain fixing that alignment for things like a close up of a drumstick hitting a cymbal. And it's glaringly obvious, right? You've suddenly got the drummer tapping away on a cymbal, and it actually changes how it sounds. Like it sounds less impactful, and it's just this weird discomfort of the alignment's not right, and it completely changes the subjective performance.
Yeah.
But in a way that you flip to dialogue, and even if you can sense it's not perfect, it can be so close. You let it go.
And the
Getting
other
it
reason
right is so important for music.
that using a tool is important to doing this is because humans are very bad at getting
Yeah.
it dialed in. So I've done this multiple times, and Ben, I'm sure you've done this multiple times, where you have a group of us in at a show, right? Where we're finishing up calibration on a room. There's a bunch of us sitting in the room, and one of the last things we're doing is lip sync. And
Yeah.
somebody will ask, "Hey, how far off ahead or behind do you think we are?" And you'll ask 10 different people and you get 10 different answers. And some of
I
them are egregiously different. And somebody will say, "I think it's spot on."
Right. And the weirdest thing, and I've got this when if I try and dial it in without, a test pattern specifically or without our sync 1, 2, and you look at it and go, lip sync's a bit behind, start adjusting it, and then you realize I'm going the wrong way.
Yes.
I just perceivably didn't even know whether I was ahead or behind.
Nope.
Once it's out more than a couple of milliseconds, you can't even, your brain just shuts down to knowing which
It's
way to
really
even fix
weird
it.
when you try and fix it. And I I guess to put this bluntly and simply, don't try and calibrate it by eye. Just do it there's a free way to actually do it. You can not as accurately as a sync 1, 2, but you can get pretty close.
Yeah.
You use a test pattern from YouTube, Spears and Munsell disc, or the new Benoit that we're going to bully him into making. And then you take your phone and you record it using slow motion, and make sure you have your
Yes.
volume up loud enough to see the flash and get the beep that comes over. Record it in slow motion and then play it back and listen for when the beep takes place and where your moving thing, you got to have one that actually moves and then has a header behind millisecond marks below it. Spears and Munsell's excellent for this. And then you can very easily tell how far ahead or behind you are. And then you can dial it in from there.
So I left the home without my phone today. I've left it at home, which was stupid. I bought an app
There is an app
Store
for it
on the
now.
iPhone,
Yeah.
and it was a few dollars. Like it was not expensive at all. And you film a test pattern,
Mm-hmm.
and you just drag it. Right, you drag the audio clip, and it gives you the audio waveform. So you drag that to the peak, and then you get the video that it's filmed at the same time, and you drag that, and it just tells you on screen your lip sync is out by X number of milliseconds, and you dial it in, film it again, and check, bang on.
Yep.
And you just move the audio and video waveforms till they line up, and it just gives you a reading. And
Use the tools to remove the
I've
human element.
forgotten what that app's called. We'll put it in the notes when I've found my phone, remembered, or checked.
I know what
App
you're
Store.
talking about, but I can't remember what it's called either. It's a
I
good app,
like.
though.
I know our actual tool was like, I'm going to say about $200.
Yes.
It's not expensive, but it wasn't low cost. If you're professionally calibrating rooms, it's a nothing to own one. As a professional tool, of course you would buy one. If you're an enthusiast doing your system once a year, this app for a few dollars is amazing. Or just use your camera, as you say, with slow-mo.
Yep.
But trying to do it with dialogue by ear is
No.
really hard.
Do not
It'll
do it.
take
It's like,
like
don't touch your CMS. Just use a tool.
Yeah.
We're
And
not good at it.
it's remarkable how very quickly, when you get it dialed in, you're able to relax into things easier. Like if you're watching a live gig and you're seeing musicians play music, it feels tighter. Like it's absurd that all we could have done is shifted audio forward or back a few milliseconds and it now sounds tighter.
Yeah.
But humans are weird and it just works.
Yep.
So it's one of those things that when you notice it, you know it's out. But if you've never checked it, it's probably out a little bit and you don't know. Fix it.
Okay. So, got through everything. Any other ones that you want to add onto this video? Catch and Sync is the app.
David Merowitz is watching, which is brilliant because now I can say to David directly, David, if you've listened, can you phone Benoit for me? So David is the UK sales manager for Trinov and many other territories, like many other territories. But he's just messaged to say the app is called Catching Sync.
We need to have you on AVS too. We need to talk about Room EQ stuff. John was supposed to message you, and I don't know if he did. So we need to chat.
So if you've just logged in, we've had a whole conversation about talking to Benoit. He said I will. Brilliant. So that's either he's going to come on your podcast or he's going to talk to Benoit. Either way, we've done our work here today.
We did what we needed to do. Bye, everybody. No, we're not leaving yet. Anything else we need to talk about with the free stuff? There's more free things that you can do, absolutely. But any other ones you want to chat about or you want to start talking about and answering questions?
Answer some questions. I actually have somebody waiting for a demo in our showroom that I will have to, at some point, allow Christian to fire the systems up and go crazy.
I thought you were going to have him do it now. Just let him do it.
Yeah, they're having coffee and stuff. So at some point, there's a demo going to happen. It's probably for the best. So wait till I'm done.
But does anybody, if you guys have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We answer them in the order that they came in. There's a few that we have starred. If we run out of questions, we'll just end the stream. But if you do have a question, drop it in the chat and we will do our best to get it answered for you. Current question, first one is from Brian Cobb. This goes back to subwoofers. I have two 32s. By cutting off the kick subs at 20 hertz with limited space, can you make an argument that ported subs are better as you eliminate the biggest weakness of ported and get more output? I would say it's always a compromise. You are getting more output down to port tune, but you can also, and typically are, introducing resonances into upper frequencies due to the ports.
So my answer might be a little different. I would say that if you weren't trying to reproduce the low end stuff, is when ported subs really come into their own, because you can get that output higher and don't worry about what they do lower. The challenge here is integrating with your 232s. So as that sub goes through its port tuning frequency, there is going to be a phase reversal. You've got to now, it doesn't just drop off a cliff. Even if you've tuned them slightly higher, they've still got output, which will end up at a point out of phase to what your 32s are doing. And this is why integrating sealed and ported is really challenging. Depending on the filters you've got, if you've got a whole load of filters and you've got a whole load of time, fine. You could be running all pass filters. You can be changing time alignment without frequency alignment. You've got loads to go at. I would say that's beyond what most people should be trying to do. It's not, let's put it this way. It's easier to make it worse than it is make it better. Like presuming David's still watching, this is something I would say of, doing a Trinov, like, when you've got more tools, you've got more ways to break things.
Yes.
If you know how to use them, those tools will absolutely make things better. But if you don't know how to use them, you can absolutely make things worse. And more tools only work if you're understanding how they work. So using a tool of, if you're going to use a ported sub as a tool, you've got to understand its strengths and weaknesses in the rest of your system. And with the 32s, that will be a challenge.
You can do it.
Absolutely
It
can do
can
it.
be done, but it's ported is not the answer in a lot of situations unless they're on their own to
But
make
if I
things
like, if I have a client who I know lives in a home, like we get it in London sometimes, where everyone's dug basements down, right? So they've suddenly got these huge homes, but actually they're essentially still terraced houses because their basements have been dug together. And we know that we can't absolutely abuse huge, like, depths. We're not trying to do infrasonic. We're going to cut the base off at 25 or 30 hertz. We're going to give them output without going really crazy because we actually can't isolate it. Ported can be great because we didn't really want that bottom anyway. It's now an easy way to get more output above. I'm always dubious of telling people to mix ported and sealed, though, because
So
it's
Brian
hard.
has a bunch of PB17s, which is why he's asking this question. Um, it can be done. It could be worse. I mean, you could be trying to integrate sealed or different ported subs into playing those upper frequencies at the same time. That is even harder.
I
Getting
don't
this
know where a PB17 is tuned. What would that be tuned to? They're pretty big things, right?
Yeah, they can get down quite low. So it may not be too bad if you cut off the port. We have to see in that room what it ends up doing and what the 32s are capable. It's a big room. So where the 32s are going to
I'm
start
trying
running
to
out of
Google it
output.
to find out. Here we go. Where is it?
Those
Where's its port tuning?
PB17s get quite low.
So if you were tuning it above, like, moderately above port tuning frequency, then you might mitigate that problem. And I'm now looking at a spec sheet that says port tuning. Okay, standing. Okay, it's more complicated, this manual that I found, than just giving me a straight answer because it's variable based on settings and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but you can look that up
You
and
can
work that out.
eliminate the port, which is probably what we're going to end up doing. Or
Yeah.
mostly eliminating it.
Which kind of then maybe takes away the benefit of
He already
having
has them.
ported sub.
He
Right.
already has them. So
Yeah.
it's a necessary evil, I would say, in order to get a better integration with
Sure.
this. But good question. And rightfully so. It's a big concern. User datagram. In terms of the level needed for chest slam, is there a certain SPL level that you would consider a minimum requirement? Reference lower, higher?
It
Personal
can
preference.
definitely be done lower than reference for sure.
Yeah.
So there is a challenge here that I would say calibrate or set your listening level to
Mhm.
where it's comfortable. And part of this is where does dialogue sound natural? If somebody's whispering, do they sound like a whisper? If they're talking, does it sound like they're talking? If they're shouting, does it sound like they're shouting? If a whisper starts to sound like shouting because you're running it so loud, back it off.
Mhm.
It's just too loud. And that may mean that airborne visceral slam isn't achievable at the level that is comfortable and sensible in your room. And that's where we can start to do other things and bring in the tactile nature using, we can put in sprung risers to get more tactile movement. We can do near field subs to really put a lot of velocity and pressure right into your structure. So there's loads of ways to make more tactile bass. That slam is, I genuinely think it's the hardest thing to achieve inside a room. And we have benefits, like doing it with waveforming, to me, is a really, like, the way we set waveforming up gives you loads of slam. That's a great thing. I love that. If you're putting subs in multiple different positions and you've got time alignment issues between them, which you're using potentially on purpose to get you consistency, like, you might have to balance seat-to-seat consistency against Slam. There
Mhm.
could be a bit of a zero-sum game that you can't make both of them perfect. And you're using a little bit of time alignment adjustment between different sub positions to get frequency consistency, which could cost you Slam. So
I don't
all of
think
these
it's
things have
a
got to be
could,
right,
I think it's an absolute, depending on your front
right?
sub setup. Unless you have a full wall of subs, the
Yeah,
probability that you're gonna be able to get both is near 0.
right.
Perfectly. You're gonna get a
Yeah,
great experience, but getting them perfect through all of your seats is near 0.
and
So
that's
it becomes a way of which way do I wanna
right.
go? And it's gonna more than likely, it's gonna be absolutely more than enough. We're
Yeah,
talking chasing percentage points of could I make it better?
and
Do
then
you need to? Probably not.
right.
But
Once those things are done, realistically, more level will give you more of that energy that gives you more of that Slam.
mhm,
If you have some of those alignment issues not perfectly dialed in, more level can be in a point. It's almost like when we show compression testing and you turn the volume up and the speaker doesn't get louder. Well, if you have an imbalance, more level might not give you any more Slam at all because you've got two things fighting against each other, and just adding more level doesn't make Slam get any better. So,
and more level can potentially, unless you've done it through calibration, contaminate things above your crossover point.
right,
Because it's not an immediate fall off, right? Your crossover is gonna be way, way out there, and if you start raising your level after the calibration where it's come back into your speaker's house curve, you're
yeah,
now pushing up all of those frequencies, and you may have some bloatiness that'll start to happen or loudness
right.
that'll start to happen with any type of
So
sound that is getting into that range.
the follow up point has just come in. Okay, so it's 4 subs, one in each corner. Currently using MSO for consistency. So I'm not an MSO expert. I have used it, played with it, but I would not claim to be an expert. But I do know there are a couple of things you can do. And one of them is you can allow or disallow it to make time alignment differences between subs. Like you can basically try and dial in alignment as accurately as possible and then lock that at the cost of consistency. Or you can leave a time alignment flexibility at to gain more consistency seat to seat. And if you are using MSO in a way that will give you a more even frequency response and allowing it a range of time alignment, I don't think you're going to achieve much Slam. I think that will be at the cost of Slam. So changing those settings in MSO can absolutely change the outcome of that. If you go back and look at a couple of our videos, I know the one when we had Peter on, we talked about it. I think we did in the other sub for where they should go. But grab REW, get the wavelet plot, and look at the time of peak energy. If you have got, like we talk about, Peter talks about it, find that video and look at when we talk about peak energy in a room on the wavelet. If it doesn't look like that, or maybe even send it to us, depending on how it does look. But you can kind of visualize Slam in that wavelet plot. If you've got big group delays, if you've got a lot of ripples in that time delay, Slam is going to be difficult to achieve no matter how much level you give. And the
Mhm.
tighter that wavelet gets, the smoother it is, the shallower the slope is, the more easily it will come. And just fighting it with level is not the answer. So once you've got it dialed in, more level, more Slam. But that isn't the fix if you don't have it to start with.
No. All right. Drew Arredondo, good morning. Any updates on VDR? Is it coming soon or are they having problems with its implementation? I have not heard anything on VDR. I'm sure we'll get an update at CinemaCon.
I think they did display it at CinemaCon, didn't they?
Did they?
I think they
I haven't
displayed it,
heard
a
anything.
commercial version of it. I believe it was scheduled to be demoed at CinemaCon. I don't know where they are on a consumer release. Obviously, we saw a version of it working at Expo last year. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I
They're
don't think
hoping, I think, for the residential version to be available later this year. There was talk
right.
about demoing something at Cedia, but don't get your hopes up. We don't know. They gotta get the commercials one dialed in first, and then they're gonna do
Is
residential.
that the case? They're doing that one first.
Commercials first. Hey, Gooman 3809. I have a QL 3000 and calculated the minimum throw with the Epson calculator. Can I move the projector closer if I add a Panamorph Alpha Pro lens? AI tells me I can.
I don't know that
I
exact
don't know the
lens,
answer for that.
but maybe. So I have a job that we did a while back, 2021, in fact, where the room was very shallow, like really shallow distance, and there was no projector that would physically fit where I needed it to go, have the noise requirements, and get the throw size.
Mhm.
But by doing a scope screen and adding the right Panamorph lens, and I don't know which one it was now because it was 4 years ago. We had the lens that actually expands the width of it rather than compressing the height. So it essentially did give us an increased throw ratio. Um, and it meant that from where we could physically place the projector, we could make a bigger image.
Well, not
So,
only through something like Panamorph, Epson sells a bunch of different lenses for these projectors, and they can get pretty close. I mean, they're
right.
ultra short throw lens. It's a snorkel mount and it sits just a couple feet away, but they can get pretty close depending on the lens that you choose. And a lot of them are zoom lenses, and those lenses have been around for a while because they're commercial. So sometimes you
Yeah.
can get lucky and buy one without a warranty on eBay. Uh, but you shouldn't just be limited to Panamorph, though there are anamorphic lenses that are going to allow you to do what you want. I don't know that the Alpha will. I would look at Epson lenses first because that's for sure going to be
So
cheaper than going with a Panamorph.
I have a love hate relationship with anamorphic lenses generally. I like when we used to struggle for enough light output, amazing because we can go wider and
Sure.
we're not throwing light away into the black bars, right? So we're
Mhm.
maximizing our light output.
But
They almost all introduce some kind of distortion. I know as they get incredibly expensive, they
the
don't.
Alpha doesn't, it minimizes or removes that, but
Okay.
you're right that it does get
And if you've got
astronomically expensive.
right, if you've got an Envy, obviously you can fix any
Yes.
barrel or pincushion that it introduces. But now if there is any distortion, you're introducing optical distortion, fixing it electronically. And if your goal was to just make the picture wider, you've kind of dropped, as I remember some of these Panamorph lenses, it could be $5, $6, $7,000 on some of the top end ones.
Mhm.
An Envy runs similar money.
The Panamorph Alpha Pro, I think, is above 10.
Okay, so you could be spending an awful lot of money to give you that maximum light output
Mhm.
to a scope screen. That if you just added that, when I know if you're adding onto an existing projector, it's different. But if you're in the market for a projector, adding that potentially $10,000 can move you up a whole class of projector that's so much brighter and has
Mhm.
loads of other benefits that the projector without the lens still looks better on a scope screen.
Yep.
Not always, but when we've got loads of light, I try and avoid lenses
And
as much as I
we've
can.
talked about this a lot with audio. Don't fix You can't fix physics with software. I would try and minimize the amount that you're having to fix at all. Get the correct
Right.
tool. And you probably, I'm not picking on you, Agu man. You've already got the QL 3000 you're trying to make changes to what you have. But for anybody that's buying new, buy the correct tool for the job. Not that he didn't, but you really want to think about, how much flexibility do I need? Am I ever
Right.
going to want to move this? Make future you not hate past you. Give yourself room to grow and change. And as Ben's saying, sometimes that comes down to having enough light that you don't need to do this. Now, the devil's advocate to that would say, if I'm lighting up the bar, I'm potentially contaminating the on-screen contrast and interesting contrast through reflections. So you've got to weigh the compromises that you're willing to make in order to get the experience that you're after. You got to consider everything. It's a sum of all of its parts, not every part on its own. A good question. Look at Epson's lenses first. They're a lot cheaper than Panamorph, but Panamorph theoretically we'll have something. Last question, unless somebody else comes up with something. Is there any way to get the slam to the chest from a rear SBA the way front hits the back?
Not that I've ever found.
You're going to tell.
I just never found a way to get the physical viscerality from the front if the subs are at the back. I mean, we have a job where the subs are at the back, but they are ported subs. I mean, they are whatever they're technically called. They're not folded horns. They're long folded. You know, they're doing their thing. But the
Like
the
a
air
Gallahorn or
velocity.
something?
Sorry.
Like a Gallahorn or something?
They're Wisdom S90Is, so whatever
Oh,
technically
okay. I don't
Wisdom
remember
call
what they are.
their thing. But at certain frequencies, the velocity of air coming out of that port is so high, it it ruffles your hair. Like and one has a high port, one has a low port because of the way we set them up. But when that comes forward, you feel it, and you see your hair moving, and it's come from behind you. Audibly, you would never locate them. They are perfectly time aligned. They disappear to their crossover freak. Like audibly, you would never know in this room they're behind you. But at a certain frequency, when that port is running at its maximum output, it. You just feel it coming and hitting you from behind. And I've never found a way to make that feel otherwise.
I feel like in higher frequencies, you absolutely can locate them.
In this particular room, the way it's done, I cannot locate them, and nobody I know that's heard that room would know they're there. You can't see them; they're completely hidden. I would say nobody that's been in that room has ever turned around and said, "Oh, subs are in the back." There was a lot of time and effort put into modeling the room, modeling where they were going. Like days and days of work went into planning it and calibrating it, way beyond what is maybe even economically viable in a normal project. Like we spent a lot of time and effort on it. I do not believe they could be localized until you feel them.
My personal preference is still to try and put subs in the front of the room if possible, instead of the back.
You won't be trying to fix a problem if
no, I don't like creating those problems and potentially, but sometimes the room has limitations and you're stuck. So I wouldn't try and do that. I would do them in the front if you can. At least have some subs in the front, even if your main array is in the back, just to give you some localization up front. If you only had their array in the rear, I feel like how the human sense is, you're going to tell in some way, shape, or form. Unless the room is absolutely perfect and dialed in.
I've never done a rear base array like that. There have been times where I've considered, and we haven't done it. And the reason we haven't done it is for this feel, where we've considered running a Trinov waveforming array essentially back to front. Normally, when we do a waveforming array, we do end up putting more subs on the front wall than the back, and we have a wave that moves through, and you need fewer subs to kind of catch and mitigate the wave that's coming. And there have been times where, because of screen geometry or placement of screen speakers, getting enough subs on the front wall has been a challenge. And we thought, do you know what? I can put more on the back wall easily. We've got less problems to move around. We can make the bigger array at the back. But then that concern is, I really like that wavefront coming and hitting me in the chest, and it's not quite the same when it hits me in the back.
Yeah.
So we've not done one to date that way.
I did miss one question. So Majek asks, does ceiling height and slope ceiling matter? Yes. Say 14 down to 8 feet in a 19.5-foot wide by 16.5-foot deep room.
So the slope is going to be interesting. If you can use it as part of angling flat in ceiling speakers towards your listening position, it might help. But if it's a straight slope, your mids or rear in ceilings could now be pointing further away from you, depending on which way it's sloping. Sloping from 14 down to 8. So I'm presuming it's 14 at the front. So it's going to angle your front heights away from you,
If he doesn't use angled speakers, you
right?
could
And
get
even if you
away
do,
with it
you'll
with
need
angled
more of
speakers.
an angle to
Yes.
counter that. So it might change where I would choose to put them because of that angle. It might change what I would choose to put there depending on how much they can internally be angled. I have a concern of intentionally. Hey, we're at Foundry, and upstairs we have a slope ceiling in our media room because the building has a slope ceiling, and we decided to use all that height because height's a luxury, and we didn't lower it flat. That was an intentional choice. So I have a den room right here with a slope ceiling that goes, I think, this way. It's tall at the front. We planned it and we counted it on purpose to make sure those speakers went like the speakers we've chosen. We did. It's actually a mixture of Perlisten in walls and on walls. So towards the back of the room, we've used Perlisten in ceilings, which I can angle the right way. The fronts to counter the slope, I've used S4Bs, are they?
So he's saying not from an Atmos situation acoustically if it's an issue.
Right. So I was going to get to that. This is my issue of a non-square room is it will change the modal behavior and it's harder to predict what's going to happen. It will have a different effect on modes. So if you had a normal first, second, third modal behavior at a room height, that first, second, and third now changes in frequency all the way along the room. And where like the height they're affected. So in a square room, you know the first mode is going to be at the same height, half the height of the room. And if your room is 2.4 meters tall and your seated ear height is 1.4, you know you've put your ear at exactly half that height. It's a bad place. Choose a lower seat or build a platform, right? You can move your ear to keep it off half the room height. In a room with a sloping ceiling, moving the seats forward or backward might now put you at half room height where it didn't when you go back. So that modal behavior might be a problem at one point, but isn't somewhere else.
Can it
It
improve
might be
the
really
overall
beneficial.
acoustic response of the room? Like you said, it can be beneficial
It might be really
or it might
beneficial,
not be.
but it might not.
It's unpredictable.
So at higher frequencies, you're going to get like they're going to bounce in a different way than if it was straight. So you won't get the same kind of slap echo between two parallel surfaces, the floor and the ceiling. Like we love building rooms with hard floors. I love putting wood floors in rather than carpet. I'm a big fan of not using carpet if you treat the ceiling properly.
Mm-hmm.
With a sloped ceiling, you could maybe get away with less treatment on either the floor or the ceiling because you're going to lose a little bit of a slap echo from straight parallel surfaces. But then that changes where reflections go. So it's I would say it has as many pros as cons, but it makes
Theoretically,
prediction
but it's
harder.
really difficult to predict of what's actually going to happen in that room
Right.
because models that we have currently depend on, and you could get into some professional models that deal with more commercial or, actual concert halls and stuff that are able to predict with angled rooms, but the tools that most of us use are not able to do that, and they rely on flat surfaces. So it could be beneficial. It could also not be. It could
Yeah.
be beneficial at certain frequencies and harmful at others. It's really difficult to
From
predict
a
what's gonna happen.
visual perspective, hang on, let me remember which way the slope's going. So from a visual perspective, I can't I'm tired. I'm trying to remember which way throws more light back in your eye. Sloping the other way. So it might help visually, like and I do quite like it gives you an opportunity to put a bigger screen in because you've got more head height at that end. We saw a room came across our desk for tender probably a year ago. We outright refused to even quote to build it because I think the design was appalling, and I'm not going to say otherwise. I'll stand by this. But it went the other way. So the room got narrower and lower at the front. Quite a long room. It's like, okay, you've now minimized the size of where you can put the screen because the room's smaller that end. And now you've got this huge, big, cavernous back, really lovely, big, spacious area at the back. and this tiny little postage stamp at the front of a screen, 100% that room needed to go the other way around.
Yeah.
Nice, cozy, encompassing feel at the back, huge screen would have been way better. But
You mean how commercial theaters typically make you feel? Small at the back, huge at the front?
right.
Yeah.
This room was designed otherwise, and they were surprised when I refused to quote to
Yeah,
build it.
so unfortunately, Majek, you're gonna have compromises. You're gonna get benefits and you're gonna get positives and negatives. Really difficult to predict, but could be good, may not be. David Cook asks, do you have any recommendations for wall design when angling wide channels in wall speakers?
Many, and I would say the best thing is subtlety. So we're generally bringing the wall out everywhere. If you're not bringing the depth of the wall out for any other acoustic treatment, suddenly by the time you angle a speaker, you might be coming out 18 inches, 400, 450 mil to its widest point when angled. And that suddenly is this huge, great big thing. We're often bringing a wall out maybe 200, 250, 300 along the full length of the wall because we've got other acoustic treatment going in there and we're doing stuff with that space. And then when you angle that speaker, it maybe doesn't actually protrude that much further. It might be a few more inches. In Screen 1 here at Foundry, we have flat walls that are pulled out and they're made of panels that have fabric over. Where the front wides are, the fabric is stretched over an open hold panel and the speaker just actually protrudes through it. It's like this, if you imagine pushing through a piece of fabric and seeing the outline, you just see this, just the corner of a speaker, but it's all dark at that point. You kind of can see it, but you don't see it. It's really discreet. But instead of bringing the whole wall out, we literally just stretch the fabric where that speaker is. So I would say it really depends on the rest of a wall. If you're trying to do it just for speaker alone, it's going to become quite big. And the interior design I normally go for doesn't involve the more, I would say, American traditional styling of having columns. But this might be a place where it helps you. If you've got some fairly ornate sized hollow columns for putting speakers in, that might give you some space to get an angled speaker inside
Columns
it.
can help. The thing that I don't like about putting in walls into something like that is if you're just creating and designing a jut out that you're going to put the speaker into, most in-wall speakers rely on boundary interaction, boundary reinforcement to get
Right.
the output that they're trying to get, especially at the low end. You are compromising that speaker's low end performance when you do things like this.
Yep.
So normal in-wall speakers are relying on you to have a flat, hard surface that the sound waves are going to come off, reflect, and then come back, like corner loading a sub. They need that boundary reinforcement in order to get that low end. Again, if you take that away, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but you're going to have to compromise it and you're going to have to help it somewhere else. So what I would suggest, not as ideal, is I would do, even an on-wall speaker, they're typically also going to need boundary reinforcement or they're designed to have that. I would do more of a traditional speaker that doesn't have a back port that you can put on a stand or something if you're trying to minimize the changes you need to a room. Outside of that, I really like stretch fabric, and you build the wall out from the main hard surface far enough that you can create a cavity or opening. Like in the Mad VR Experience Center, you can probably see them on the sidewalls where the walls come out and then they come in and then they go straight and then they come back out. And those angles allow you to build your wides in so they're angled towards you. And then in the back of the room, they come in a little bit the same way so that you have those angles for the rear wides.
Yeah.
And it provides you without compromising the aesthetic because they're built that way, the ability to angle the speakers. And then all the speakers in the Mad VR Experience Center are literally just sitting on cinder blocks, but it allows me to angle them however they need to. You could also take these Ascendo as a perfect example. Is I have in the past used VESA mounts to get the speakers on walls off just far enough that I could angle them towards the main listening position while still having a decent amount of boundary reinforcement. So I'm of the opinion that you don't really want to take an in-wall speaker and angle it because you're compromising its performance, unless you can make that wall large enough that it's got enough boundary reinforcement that
So
it's
I
able.
was going to ask you, who else makes speakers that are specifically angled that way, right? So Ascendo make wedges in now most of
Mhm.
their sizes. You can get certainly 8s,
Martin
10s,
Logan has the
12s.
MP10 that's
Um,
angled.
I know. I remember seeing at Expo. I'm sure they exist. I've not actually checked, but I remember seeing them at Expo maybe a year or so ago. Theory Audio
Mhm.
making their on wall, and I don't think you could change it after you bought it.
Theory
But you
has
could
it.
choose which angle the bracket, like
Triad has angled in walls that will do this. There
right?
are some manufacturers that allow you to do this. And my suggestion, if you go down that pathway, is find a manufacturer that allows you to get through the tool that you need for this job. And then I personally would timbre match everything else to that. I would stay within that manufacturer as long as it's able to do what you're asking it to do. There are some out there that will, and Ascendo, Triad, Martin Logan has an angled speaker. SVS has one because they're used for like I call them bouncy house speakers where they're up firing Atmos, but you can also use them depending on the performance as angled speakers on
Yeah.
walls. The
Now
MP10's an
I
angled
would
all wall.
say of adjustable speakers that adjustable speakers are slightly different because we don't actually know, even if we've got data for speaker, we don't actually know what it will do at the angle you've orientated it.
Mm-hmm.
So my preference for non-square, like the wedge, would be a speaker that has been made and engineered to not be square. And we
Yeah.
have measurement data for it in that non-square
So David
position.
says that he's got Perlison in walls. What I would do to timbre match those is I would either use as easiest solution if you don't want to build a wall, which I'm not a huge fan of because I don't like its aesthetic, is either use a traditional speaker in that position and put it on wall or on a stand on the floor or something, or they just came out with their X series, which are on walls that you could then mount using a VESA mount, like a display or a monitor mount, and then get the needed angle. So it's angled just a little bit. You're compromising on its SBIR, but you're getting
I like where
additional.
David's going here. You've helped me confirm I'll go with speakers on a stand for the wides.
Oh, there you go.
Now, if in the last almost 2 hours we've done nothing else than helped you confirm to do that, and absolutely, I'm sure you were never going to do it, but mounting wides facing each other and not you, then our job is done
It's
because
not a.
that's
I'm gonna say that in some situations, depending on the scope of the theater and the budget, sometimes that's unavoidable. But
sure,
it's
but it's
definitely not
never
ideal.
ideal.
No, absolutely not. But sometimes it's a compromise that as long as you know it going in.
I'll be honest and say, if I had to have front wides directly facing each other, I would choose not to have them.
Yeah,
I would honestly choose not to have them.
yeah,
I think you'll get a better overall experience from not having them than having them positioned facing each other.
yeah, I agree. Okay, a couple more
Cool.
questions. They keep coming. You
Oh,
got time for 2 more? Oh, there's
yeah.
3
There
more.
was a really interesting one that came in. This one you've put on screen. So I am glad that I
Can
am
put an
quite
end
young.
to an old myth among acousticians from the 1990s. It is entirely possible to have both infra bass and slam chests in a room. Now, thanks to waveforming, can we manage any more overlap?
So I've never heard this myth that I presume the myth was that it was not possible. Um,
Huh.
I was still in short trousers and sandals in the 90s. I was,
Yeah.
still at school.
Can't have both.
I've not heard that myth, and I'm pleased I haven't heard it because I've spent quite a long time making systems that do deliver both.
Mhm.
And there is a point where I think some of these things are zero sum and that improving one can cost you the other. But I don't think it is impossible to get
Uh,
really good infrabass and chest slam in the
I
same
could
room.
see why this would be an issue that long ago. You know, maybe you're getting subs that have the excursion or the size, but the motors
It's
weren't able to
very
do it.
possible that
So your
35
compromise
years ago
is,
they
you know,
couldn't have the subs
I
for it.
have to choose one or the other in order to get
Yeah,
a
I can
good
believe that.
quality output. I
You could
could
have
see
big
that.
slow subs or small fast ones, right? I can
I
believe
could
that.
see that for
Let's start.
sure.
They're about to start a demo, so we're going to wrap up anyway. So yeah, it could have been that, but
Now? No.
Waveforming does make this easier, right? Because getting a singular wavefront is really key to getting some of this slam, right? Because it's doing a lot of this time alignment for you in the waveforming calculations to make this wavefront that comes through the room. That's a bit that a lot of people doing this without waveforming will be missing. I'm sure other technologies do it. I honestly don't actually know how the Dirac art can do slam as well as say waveforming because of the bass coming from multiple different directions. It's multiple spherical radiating waves. Not saying it can't do it. I've said this before. I don't fully understand how art works. And if you think that makes me the idiot, that means you're the idiot. Because it's really complicated.
I don't know.
Waveforming absolutely makes it easier.
Yeah, I don't know how Dirac works. It's a very flexible system, and it does give me slam in the room. I just don't understand it well enough to have an opinion on that.
Absolutely. It's the actual physics of how it's working are complex. Let's put it that way.
Thibault, kind of following up on that, what the Infra offers specifically with dedicated subwoofers, even though there's very little level, would make a good topic for an upcoming video. That's fair.
Yeah, and we should go through and find. We talked in our previous one about specific demo stuff. We should go and find a proper Infra playlist
for music or movie demos.
Movie, like just a whole load of specific movie ones where Infra isn't just there; it adds to the experience. Because there's loads where it's there, and it's like, oh, that's nice. But then you go to like A Quiet Place, and A Quiet Place, so much of the unease, the unpleasant. I know it sounds weird wanting it to be unpleasant, but it's a horror film, right? And so much of the horror of Quiet Place comes from that really deep, low, just grumbly. Like it, Quiet Place is so much better with Infra. So we should find a list of films that are actively better with Infra.
Okay, we can do that. Last question, and this goes back to the PB17s and ports and infrasonics. If I plug all the ports on the PB17s and run them in sealed mode, would that solve the problem? It would certainly help.
I'd need to see their data, but I think it would probably help, yes.
Yeah. It would significantly
eliminate
a lot of that.
It would be much easier to time align and calibrate and get great summation where you need it with, I think you would.
And I think you're going to get enough low-end extension that it's not going to matter.
And I didn't need the output at the bottom end of the PB17s.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain that's where I'd start.
Yeah. And the 32s, you have two of them. They're going to be able to play higher than 20 hertz. You can get them into 25 or 30 hertz and they're going to be fine.
Easy.
And so that means if you're plugging the ports and the PB17s start running out of output at that point, the 32s can.
The only reason I would not take the 32s up to like 25 hertz-ish is what we did here, which is we have a waveforming array and then the infras are independent of that. And the higher I push that crossover, the less benefit I'm getting from waveforming.
Yeah.
So we want waveforming to go as far as it can. Then we fill it under with the 32s. If you're not doing an array as such, moving over to 32s a bit higher is not necessarily going to give you
Dirac.
Yeah, I don't think you'll have a problem by bringing up that crossover a bit.
Nope. All good.
And Dirac might fix all these things anyway. Like, as I say, it does a lot of very clever things. The exact physics, some of this stuff is witch doctoring to me, but it might fix a load of those problems anyway.
There you go. Okay. Well, we'll wrap that one up. Ben and I are going to talk offline about what the next topic for the next stream is going to be. But you guys gave a lot of good suggestions. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop them in the comments of this video. Do not type them into chat after we end the stream. We will not see it. So drop it into the comments, and we like them. I mean, typically we'll make a stream off of them. If you guys don't give us any, we'll make something up. And whether you like, you're just going to have to like it. You don't have a choice. But anyway, guys, stay safe out there. Enjoy your
Cheers.
Journeys, and we will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. See you later.
Cheers.